Hello everyone and welcome to Year 5, Block 5, Lesson number 6. In this lesson you should be studying CEM and ready for a non-verbal reasoning lesson. My name is Luke Lloyd and I can't wait to get started. So today what we'll be covering, well, three main practice areas. We're going to have a look at some reflection and folding questions. We'll talk briefly about those. I think they're quite nice questions, quite easy, but certainly worth recapping to make sure you know what we're doing and how we go about practicing them in particular. There's some fun things we can do. And then the main activity for today, we're going to move on and we're going to look at cubes and nets. And cubes and nets is perhaps one of the most popular questions, and the ones I'm most frequently asked about, because it's something, again, that can very much click or not, depending on how good your explanation is. And we'll go through and I'll give you some hints and tips and sort of a checklist to run through about how to complete those. So that's our main focus today, to get to do those two topics from non-verbal reasoning. And if we look at our objectives, to recall the main strategies for solving cubes and nets, that's the really big thing. And specifically, we're going to look at alien shapes, opposite sides, arrows and directions, and some of the left-handed versus right-handedness. But we'll go through that in more detail at the appropriate time. To start with, this is perhaps a bit of a warm-up. We're going to look at some folded imaging questions. So these folded images we found on page 12 and 13 of this book here, which is your Spatial Reasoning Quick Practice Test Book. So if you could all get that out, pause the video if you need to, get that out, get ready, pencil as well, and we can get started. Right, so here we are. So this is the first example in the folded images question type. And what you'll notice again is you have 5 minutes and 10 questions. So these are 30-second per question questions. So you shouldn't be spending too long on them. What you are doing is in each question, the letter will be folded along the line given. And then it should be folded, this says right here, the fold should be made toward the dotted line. So for example, I was going to pick my piece of paper, I was going to grab this one, I'd be folding it in towards the line. So if I was pinching where that arrow first starts and dragging it over, that is from here, pinching it and dragging it over, the fold will end up on that line. And then I simply have to ask myself, what shape will be reduced? So in this case, it's going to be a symmetrical shape, and they're going to overlap, so I would actually end up with A. Now here you can, of course, use elimination. So for example, if the fold line, so if this line here is not along the same axes, if this one's vertical, that's horizontal, that's quite an easy elimination. And similarly with D, again, that would result from quite an easy elimination. But for example, comparing A and C, that's just going to be very much a visual skill, you visualizing and working out which one is the correct answer. Now, before I get you started, just some things that I'm going to talk about that can help with these quite a lot. One would be simply to get out some piece of paper, to cut out some shapes and to begin folding them, having a play. But similarly, any skills like origami, like paper aeroplane making, they're fantastically useful. And again, we like to talk about, obviously, we're all currently still in our homes. We're looking for things to do. Well, online, there's some fantastic resources. If you just type in beginner's origami or beginner paper airplane folding. In fact, I think on Saturday, I might play in the break time a video for everyone on how to make the world's greatest paper airplane, which is a fantastic video. So it might be worth dropping in to see us on Saturday for that. I'll just talk about some of the most exciting things you can do. And again, in the same way that I often say that reading, and in the same way I think on our first lesson with me, on lesson 2, we discussed actually taking the time to draw out some cubes and doing some cube art can be quite a useful thing to practice while also being fun. This is another area where actually it can be quite fun to practice, to make some paper airplanes, to do some origami, to have a bit of a play around with some folding some paper, but it also conveys that valuable skill, because the more you practice, of course, the better you're going to be able to visualize these things. And so that's really useful. So that's something I would recommend. Right, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the timer. You'll have 5 minutes. Of course, I suggest you then pause the video, wait the 5 minutes. You'll have to require a timer in your own home, perhaps. Again, or if you're on YouTube, you can always type into YouTube 5-minute timer and use one of the ones that pops up there. And then I, of course, will start to go through the questions. So good luck, everyone. Your time will start now. Right, everyone, well done. That's your 5 minutes. Let's start now going through some of the questions together. So for question 1, again, it's given us the fold line. We know what we're going to have to start completing. So if we look here, the left hand is folded over to the right hand side. So we're going to end up with this shape appearing down again. And again, this is one of the examples where sketching on the shape can help. And I'm going to see nothing else. This circle will match the outer circle. So what I'm looking for is, if I draw it in the correct way, so we're going from, in this case, left to right, so we're folding it in this direction, this top shape is going to reappear up there, so I think my answer is C. And again, couldn't be B because something's disappearing. And we had to get that sort of V shape in the middle, where this bottom row was already there, but this top bit is being reflected in the other direction. So 1 is C. For question 2, if we look here, we're folding this shape over. The only one that matches, if we fold from left to right, is B. And the reason is this is a nice 90-degree angle, and that will mean these will map directly onto each other. But the important thing, the reason A is locked out, is we'll end up with that that diagonal line there. So really, that's the problem part here. The reason it's not A and D, and of course, C is incorrect because of the angle. That 90-degree angle there, and my 45-degree line cuts it perfectly, so it'll be reflected perfectly onto one another. Question 3, again, I'm going from here, some options. For me, I think we could definitely have C as it appears, and we're having the right-hand side to fold on top of the left-hand side. So this appears on top, which of course means we only see the right-hand side because it's larger and hides it entirely. Couldn't be B because of the line starting at the fold, which of course our line is inset slightly. Couldn't be A, and certainly couldn't be D as well because it's a combination of the large width with a narrow side. That's why it's C. Question 4, again we've got to think whether we're folding this arrow down or these two V's up. I think for me, A looks quite compelling because I can see those two legs getting folded up to now point in this direction. You'd end up with a W, but with these two on the front and that at the back. Why not C? Well, there's no way to hide one shape behind the other, so C and D immediately go. And in terms of B, the issue I have there is simply that it's been rotated round. And again, what we're doing is we're folding these shapes, and that the only move we're making is the fold. So we're not folding and then rotating, and that's why A is my answer. Right, question 5. Again, one fold. We need to go from the shape to the other. Looking at the angle now, I am expecting them not to overlap perfectly. So really, D jumps out to me as being the only one that could be correct, because what I've got is this downward direction. We're coming in, we'll be getting redirected at 90 degrees out in this direction. So my oval should be coming out here like this. And that's of course what matches with D. Problem with A, B, and C, we would require, if this is the circle, we would require the line to be like this in order to get them to match perfectly on each other, which is not what we're getting with our lines. So D jumps out to me straight away as being the answer. Question 6, again, which ones could I have? Well, A, there's no way to hide this longer section behind the smaller, so it couldn't be A. B looks fairly compelling to me because I can imagine this line here being folded up, causing this. So if this is my line, and this is that result, and it would result in this sticking out above, so I'm pretty confident that B is the answer. Yeah, again, couldn't be C. And again, I don't know how you managed to create the fold D, where you've got two shapes showing through one another, so definitely not D as well. Right, number 7, starting to get a little bit trickier. As we go through, again, we know which way it's folding. What I can see again is that classic right angle, which means that whichever way I fold, these arrows are going to overlap with each other. And when two shapes perfectly overlap, they disappear. It has the effect of one of them disappearing. So again, I'm looking for only one arrow to be there, so it couldn't be that one and couldn't be this one. And again, I'm trying to get there in one go, and I can see that if I bring this arrow and I reflect it over, it's going to overlap on this one, which will give me C, the answer. I can't see a way to get B without rotating my shape somehow, which again is not what we're doing. We're going there in one smooth fold. What do we end up with? So yeah, number 7 is C. Right, let's look at question 8. Ooh, bit of an interesting one. So we're either going to end up with the right-hand side folding over, giving us an arrow that a thunderbolt that folds back on itself, or we're going to have a thunderbolt going to the right-hand side. Let's have a look and see what we could end up with. I don't like A and I don't like D right off the bat because, of course, I've lost far too much material in D, and in A, I've generated too much material. I've somehow doubled the number of thunderbolts I've been given. Comparing B and C, well, I think the fact that I can already see part of the shape through C tells me that C has not been drawn correctly, because of course if you folded something over, and unless it was translucent paper, there'd be no way to see the folds behind it, so I'm quite confident in saying it's B, and if I look at it, I bring this one over on top, I would see that this arrow sticks out and obscures part of it, so yeah, I'm quite happily going to say question 8 is B. Question 9, let's have a look at this one. I think is going to have to be, well, we can definitely eliminate this C, because I can't see anyway that larger section will be hidden behind the smaller, so not C. I also don't like D, because I can see right off the bat that my line has moved, my reflection, so it can't be D. So now we're comparing question 9, A and B, and I can see that for question A, that if I grab those and fold them over, again, that would be moving in this direction, it would snuggle in quite nicely. So I must say I'm fairly confident A is correct. If I looked at that point there, would fold to that point there. So I like the look of A. Now, why not B? Well, you could in theory have this side folding background behind, but I think the slightest parts would stick out. I don't, in terms of length, to me that section there might just stick out the top. So I'd sort of be expecting these little, not well, it's a bit big, but these dots to appear here, here, and here, where I would see the slightest bit of shape behind it just poking through. But again, I think for number 9, really, if you selected B, I think you can make a compelling argument, because certainly when I check the answers, it tells me that A is correct. If I was to have this rotated the other way, and if it doesn't show here, here or here, in theory, I think then also B could be argued as correct, since you've got the same 4 shapes. So really, I think not a perfectly designed question, because you could certainly make an argument for B. So I'm going to put a little green circle to say, yeah, I think if you put B, because it had been folded around behind it and it was entirely hidden, and these points weren't quite the same length enough to show out, and since they don't show here sticking out, then there's no actual reason to presume they would show out here either. So A or B on that question. I think the question designed is slightly at fault there. Right, question 10. Oh, this is an interesting one. What's interesting about question 10 is it sort of, to me at least, it makes you think slightly of 3D. I can imagine this sort of rotating around the central pillar. It's really important to remember we're not rotating around, we are reflecting. And so if we compare a point, this one here should be the exact same distance in. This outer portion will be exactly the same distance out. So what we're going to end up is this shape appearing. Rather, when I first looked at it, I was kind of considering it mirroring round and appearing the same, but no, it's reflecting. And so again, if this one appears here, it will appear here. If this point appears here, this point appears here. So I can sort of use those little guidance marks to say, now I'm looking at the left, this is what's going to appear. Ooh, so that means for already, what's happened there? That means already I can see the shape that's beginning to appear is very much shape B, because I can see this moves round, that's fine. You wouldn't end up with A, because that's actually a doubling of both sides, nor could you end up with C, because again, you've got far too much material. And in terms of D, even if you folded it behind the other, it still would come out be the same way. You can either fold this piece round, or that be of this piece over, or this piece over. So it couldn't be D either. So the answer to this question 10, B. Quite confident with that one. So again, just watch out for question 9, because I think you could definitely make an argument for both of those answers. But other than that, give yourself a score, guys. Really well done. Hopefully that made sense. Again, something just to highlight, we've got a new timetable coming in now. The way the timetable has worked is we're going to say very simply, in terms of Q&As, questions and answers, and the purpose of a Q&A is an opportunity for you or for the children to come down, ask questions on any topic in regard to Teach It Right, or anything that you feel we can help with. That could be homework, that could be the lesson, that could be earlier lessons, it could be anything at all. We're going to have a Q&A follow every single lesson. So as long as you can find a lesson for your exam board or your year group on the timetable, then very simply, you can just come on to any lesson, the last bit of the lesson, and you'll know that there'll be a Q&A there, or an opportunity for us to answer any questions. So even if you didn't want to watch the whole lesson, you might just come for that Q&A. So if you did need any help with homeworks or any of these questions, that would be a perfect place to come and get some help from one of our lovely tutors. Right, let's move on, guys and girls. So now we're going to do cubes and nets. So before you guys start, it will be page 26 and 27, but I suggest just get your book ready, but don't start, because I'm actually going to take the time now to run through and just teach the topic of cubes and nets as if you'd not done it before. Now, of course, you may have gone over these, you may have seen these before, that's absolutely fine. But because cubes and nets is one of those real potential difficulty subjects where people find, oh, I really don't like those for a long period of time, of course, you often end up with kids then who have cracked the code, who've started to spot them, and then they become lovely. I love cubes and nets, they're one of my favourites, but it's because I've had lots of practice. So let's just go through again. Let's talk about the learning points, make sure they all make sense to each other. So really, for me, there are 4 things to consider, and I try and frame them in a humorous light, so you can remember them easier. And here are the 4 points, and we'll go through them step by step. So if we look at the first one, on the left, I have actually drawn out a net. Obviously, the thing on the left is a net. The thing on the right, these are all examples of cubes. So if you look at my net, I've got, in blue, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And immediately what I've done is I've actually labelled in the bottom right corner, so I've added in the green, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. And you'll see what that means in a second when I give you an example of the rule on question 2. But to begin with, the first thing I want you to think about is if you're ever given a net, and up here you're given a cube, can I eliminate any alien shapes? And I use the word eliminate because, of course, we always eliminate in terms of crossing out our answers, but also you eliminate aliens to save the day, protect the human race. If you've ever watched any 1960s sci-fi movies like my dad enjoys, you'll understand the need to fight off the aliens. So, on the left, why is this cube an alien shape? Well, obviously, this smiley face has shown up out of nowhere. And if on my net I don't have a smiley face, there is no way it can appear. So step 1, eliminating aliens, is the easiest because it's very simple. That just says if you cannot find a shape that is on your cube on the net, it means the cube cannot be correct, so you remove it. This is the quickest step, and this is why it's first. What you'll notice is each of these gets slightly more complicated, and the hope will be, of course, that maybe you'll be able to eliminate all but one answer in the first or second step, and then you won't have to do the third and fourth. So we do it always in this order, so 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, because it will mean you end up finding the answer quickest. So next we eat up the pears. Now, of course, this is a bit of a joke. I don't necessarily mean the fruit, the pears, but instead we have to look at the pairs on our net. And these are the pairs that I've actually labelled. So if we go through them again, so here I've got 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. What's special about these pairs? Well, these pairs can never be next to one another. And so if I was to look, and if I was to fold this side up and this side up, they would actually be on opposite sides of each other. So if I was to just draw that as a sketch, I'd have my number 2, which is the back one, and then I'd have sort of one side, let's do it in red, I'd have one side coming forward, and I'd have another side coming forward, but hopefully you can see these are on opposite sides. So if I was looking from the left, I wouldn't be able to see what's on this face, and if I was looking from the right, I wouldn't be able to see what's on the opposite side. So in your cube, you can never have these pairs next to each other. So that's why we eliminate them, we eat them up, we get rid of them. So let's just actually draw out, based on this net, which ones couldn't appear next to each other. Well, for example, I could never have 5 and 6 next to each other. This would be wrong. If I ever saw that, I could eliminate it. Nor could I have 1 and 3 next to each other. It doesn't matter what plane, it could be next to each other in this direction or next to each other in that direction. 1 and 3 couldn't exist because, again, my purple don't match. And finally, I could never have 2 and 4 next to each other. And it wouldn't matter if it was 2 and 4 or 4 and 2. It just simply can't exist, and so I eliminate it. So again, once you can spot the pairs, and I recommend at first, maybe when you're first learning these, if you find these difficult, you might want to just label the corners. I certainly wouldn't recommend in the exam labeling more than one of these. So maybe if you had 10 questions, you might label the first net, but after that, you just don't have time in the exam to go through and label each one. So really what I would like is you guys to go away, please, and try and learn the pairs that can't be next to each other. But of course, that labeling as a first step can be quite useful. And again, it's quite quick then to be able to eliminate. And what you'll find actually for quite a lot of questions, just step 1 and 2 will get you to the answer. So just by eliminating any alien shapes and getting rid of any pairs, you'll find your answer. Right, the last 2 are slightly more complicated, but also thankfully slightly rarer. The next one is to add arrows and tails. Well, with arrows and tails, what do I mean? Really, it means to consider the direction of things. So if I look at my shape here, I've got 1, 2, and 5. If I was to add in an arrow, and let's do it in a nice bright red, if I was to add in an arrow underneath my 1, so now I've turned my 1 into an arrow, and I was to make just some part of the 5 that sticks out to me, so here that 5 sticks out, and I add those arrowheads in, it gives me a sense of direction. I now know that my 1 should be pointing towards the 2, and my 5 should also be pointing towards the 2, but importantly the top part of the 2. Well, I can now use those little arrows, those little sketches that didn't take too long, just to go little arrowhead, arrowhead, to compare the two of these. Which one's correct, the left or the right? Well, hopefully you can see I've pre-added in the arrows here, but if I have this one and I compare it to this one, which is the correct? Well, it's not this first one that's pointing towards a 5, but it's this second one here. So there's my correct one, here's my wrong one, because I know my 1 should be pointing, it should be in line with the 2. And so that allows me to compare them. Similarly, I could just check, yep, my 5 should be pointing towards a 2, and it is in both cases. But just by adding arrows to things and giving them direction, it can really help. Well, that's arrows. What do I mean by tails? Well, sometimes adding an arrow doesn't help, but for example, I've seen this shape a couple of times, where, for example, you have a swirl, and you need to consider what direction. Well, I suppose you could add an arrow onto any distinctive feature, so that should be pointing down. But similarly, and I've seen this before, some people add tails, maybe not as long as that, but to consider it. So there's my little lollipop. And again, it just helps give myself direction. So as long as I was consistent in my net, continuing a line going down, and then on my shape, continuing a line going down, it just helps give me direction. So it's really considering what should be pointing at what should be facing in which direction. And so just to give you some examples, I mean, these are numbers, they're not the easiest thing to draw, but for example, my 3, I can consider what should my 2 3s be pointing at. In this case, they'd actually be pointing up at the 5 once it's folded. Again, my 6, it's not as easy with a 6 to give it direction, but I might consider, well, this top left portion of my 6 shouldn't be pointing towards a 2. There's all sorts of things like that where you consider what direction things should be facing. Similarly, the 4, which direction? I've got 2 arrowheads, the 4 should be pointing, the base of the 4 should be pointing away from the 3, for example. That might allow me to eliminate something. The one thing just to point out, you cannot add arrows and tails to perfect circles, nor to squares. So anything with multiple lines of symmetry, you can't add arrows to. So you just have to simply discount those and hope something else has some sort of direction. Right, the very last section is to have a look at left versus right shapes. And so it's simply to consider the fact that these two cubes that I've drawn are not the same. It's not possible. And the example I would often make is if you look at left-handed versus right-handed, and this is where a sort of somewhat ludicrous sketch. So if I draw a little hand, so here's a hand, not the best hand you've ever seen, I'm sure, but with one thumb, and I draw that's my right hand. If I was then to draw my left hand, what you'll notice is that they are mirror images of one another, but you can't overlap them. So for example, I can't overlap this, it's not the same. The thumbs stick out on the edge. So it's not possible to say that they're identical. Now, of course, you could reflect one onto the other, but that's not what we're doing. If I was to spin this around, no matter how many times I rotated this, my 2 would always be on the left, and my 3 would always be on the right. So these are not the same. So you have to sometimes consider, and this is often the final step, which side should things be on. So if I looked here, for example, I consider the 1, 2, and 6. So if I was to draw myself a cube, let's see if I can get one. If I had the 1 on top, the 2 would have to be on the left, and the 6 would have to be on the right-hand side. And it wouldn't be correct to have it the other way around, because it's just not possible. So that's the final step. Again, that one I think is one of the harder to compare. Also, there's nothing funny, I'm afraid to say, like, to help you remember it, but it is worth remembering, and it's often the last thing to think about. But in the same way that left and right hands can't map onto each other, you have to consider which side things are on. Right, so there are my rules. I think they help, hopefully. Again, often just using steps 1 and 2, and maybe a single arrow or a single bit of direction, you'll get the answer. One more thing I'd just like to show you is all the faces that can't marry up, because of course I showed you with the most common, which is this T-shaped net in the middle. But there are many different types of net, all that will produce cubes. In fact, these are all the options. And hopefully what you'll notice is I've had them, they're color coded for you, so you can go away and learn these. It might be worth printing this out, taking a photo of it, perhaps trying to recreate it yourself in your jotter books, and just have a think about how each of these faces, if you look, this folded up, that folded up, yep, they'd be opposite each other. Yep, the 2 blue would be opposite, yes, the 2 greens, and again, they're color coded, so if they're the same color, they could never be found next to each other. It's just quite interesting to see. Perhaps you might even want to cut out some of these more exciting ones down here. How on earth would you fold these to make a cube? Well, perhaps you want to cut them out and see if you can do it. And again, guys, if you do any arts and craft type things where you do cut things out, please do post them on the Facebook group. I think that's so exciting. Right, let's move on. It's time to have a look at some of these questions and hopefully put what we've discussed into practice. So what we need to do, and it actually says over here, pages 26 and 27, is test number 8. So let's just change that, 26 and 27. I think it's really important that for these ones, again, you apply the skills we've just discussed in order. Again, don't be afraid to mark things on your book. Your book is your resource to use to help you get the questions. So you must eliminate. So if for example, let's go through the example together. What would I want to see? Well, first off, perhaps in your first time, if you're not confident, you might be pairing things up. So there's 1 and 1 that can't be found next to each other, 2 and 2, 3 and 3. So I'm just remembering which ones can't be found next to each other. And again, I'm then seeing, can I use that? Well, for example, look, triangle and circle. That means B immediately is removed. Any alien shapes that shouldn't appear? Is there a pentagon in all of them? Yes, yes, yes. But if you look at D, 2 triangles. So that means one of these triangles is an alien. So we like to eliminate our aliens, so we get rid of that. So already now we've got down to 50-50 nice and quickly. And we have a little look at C. Again, we might be able to compare some alien shapes. So we've got this. In fact, look at that. If you look here, my pentagon along with my parallelogram can't be next to each other. So already, just from steps 1 and 2, I've been able to eliminate to find my answer. And again, you often find that. So just by eliminating the alien shapes, which was this one here, and then by eliminating the pairs that shouldn't be next to each other, these two, I was left with the answer. Fantastic. So really, certainly for cubes and nets are the ones where I'd want to see everything eliminated to leave you with one answer. There are some questions types where you'd eliminate until you spot the correct one, but for these, really, more often than not, I want to see everything eliminated. But again, going through those points in order, the next thing for us to consider would have been to sort of see what's pointing at what. So for example, I might have considered that my pentagon is pointing up towards my round cornered square, or I might start considering the fact that, yes, look, the triangle is pointing away from the pentagon, things of that nature. And then finally, it's that left and right. So that's how I want to see these done, guys and girls. You've got 5 minutes for 10 questions. This will be quite a challenging one, I have a feeling. If you do not finish within the time, I suggest before coming through and going through the answers, you give yourself a bit of extra time to go through and just finish it. And now you might make a mark of where you got up to so you know how well you did to time. But I think for these, because practicing cubes and nets is just so valuable, I wouldn't want anyone to not get all the practice they could. So I suggest do time yourself for 5 minutes. But if you don't finish, take the time to finish before looking at the answers. Right, guys, really good luck. Off you go, and I'll see you all in about 5 minutes. Good luck. Don't forget to pause it. Right, everyone, welcome back. Let's start going through the answers. So, question 1. So as we go through these, you can see we've got 1 and 2. The answers are C and A. Let's just talk a bit about why. Again, I think for the first one, it's never hurts just to go through and say. So again, because my very first shape, I might have labelled 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. Oh, let's label it a bit more clearly. 3 and 3. Again, I'm putting them in the same corner to sort of match up to give us a clue. So you should never be able to... Now, one thing that's really worth noting though, because we've got a duplicate, this one and this one could also be 1 and 2 here. So you've got to be very careful unless they have multiple of these arches together. I would be hesitant about eliminating something based on the one, because if you just something to watch out for, if you are eliminating pairs, remember if you ever spot 2 shapes that are the same, you've got to consider that it could be either of them. So for example, this C here, you might have jumped away and, oh, eliminate it, but actually no, it could be this C and this C, depending on the direction things are pointing in. Right, let's see what else. Can we eliminate any other shapes? So if we've got this shape and that's fine. So far, so good. Now, B, to me, it jumps out as being incorrect because I can see that these 2 arches, the peaks of the arches, sort of are pointing towards each other. But what I notice is the peak of this arch is pointing towards my square. So immediately, this is a step 2. I can eliminate it because it's not pointing in the wrong direction. I've not found anything, sadly, that I can eliminate because it's an alien. So now what else can I have a look at? C and D, well, now D can be removed because I've got my square and my heart. So that's a pair that shouldn't match. Now I'm just looking between A and C. So why isn't it A? Well, again, if I look, the base, the feet of my filled in rainbow should be pointing away from my L-shaped cube. And currently this one's pointing towards it. So again, based on direction, I eliminate A. So again, that's just another example of how I'd have gone through the process. So for question 2, again, I think it's probably worth just talking through these questions that make the video a little longer. I'd hate for anyone to not understand that as to why. So if we look at question 2, we can say A looks okay to me because we've got this arrow pointing towards the base there and this shape on the right hand side. So actually I think it is A. Why isn't it B? Well, we've got the base of my pentagon should be facing the circle, and the base here is facing the little Pac-Man shape, so it's not B. Why not C? Well, if I look, this tear shape has sort of somehow moved up and to the right in this one, where it should be underneath the base. If you look at these three are in a line, that means it would be top, bottom, side. And in fact, the main reason you can go to C is look, this shape and this shape shouldn't appear on the same cube, and they are, so not C. So that's a case of eliminating pairs. And why not D? Well, if we look at it, we've got, again, if you look, the base of my pentagon that should be pointing towards the circle somehow seems to be pointing towards this little teardrop shape. So it's not D again. And again, this is me adding a tail. So that's a step 3. Right, let's move on. 3, 4, and 5, here are the answers. We've got A, B, and C. Let's run through. So A, B, and C. I'll go through and tell you why we can eliminate all the other options. So for question 3, we can say it's not B, because if you look, I've got a diamond and an arrow, and I should never have those next to each other, so that's a pair elimination. Why not C? Well, if you look, I don't have to add an arrow, in this case it is an arrow, my arrow is pointing away from this shape. Currently it's now pointing towards it, so not C. And finally, why not D? Well, again, if you look here, my arrow should neither be pointing away from or towards this trapezium, but in this case it's pointing away from it. So again, that's incorrect. Similarly, you could have done it via pair elimination because I shouldn't have these two shapes next to each other, and they are. So for number 9, I think 9 is a bit of a tricky one. Let's go through A. Sorry, number 9. Number 4, the fourth one. Why not question 4? Well, for part A, one thing I think helps realizing is that this edge here actually matches this edge here. They touch, they actually fold around, they loop around to begin. What that means, and it can help you to do this, to spot it, if I was to take this bottom square here and just sketch what's in it, it can sometimes help me to see, because it's these three next to one another that helps. And if I do this, I see that the arrow should be pointing towards a circle, and that's correct, the arrow is pointing towards a circle. But this side here, when I fold the two down, will be pointing in towards the circle. And we'll notice it's actually closest to the white circle. But on A, this shape when it's folded is closest to the black circle. So what's happened is they've actually altered. In order for A to be correct, you need to have the white circle on the right and the black circle on the left. So it's not A because these faces have been swapped round. We've checked the answers and said that it is B. Why isn't it C? Well, let's have a little look. That's next to the triangle, that's fine. But if you look, the flat of the triangle should be next to my sort of rounded shape. And you can hopefully see here, the flat is next to my star. So it's in the wrong place. And then for D, why isn't it D? Well, again, the arrow, my white arrow, is pointing away from the triangle. Or sorry, the flat of the triangle is pointing away from the arrow, if you look, the flat now is no longer pointing. So again, this shape has been rotated incorrectly. So that's why it's not D nor C. Right, number 5. It's always worrying when a math teacher struggles to count. But luckily, NVR brain is obviously turned on. Number 5, why not A? Well, I've got my heart, and my heart should be pointing away from the star. But you'll notice the heart currently in B is pointing away from the star, but in A, it's not. So I don't like A, because that heart isn't. Now B, I've said the star's correct, but is there anything else we can remove? Ah, yes, it's an alien shape. Look, this is meant to be filled in black, but in this one it's not. So not B. Good old alien, we like those, nice and quick. Part D, why can't it be D? I've got my shield and my plus and times. There's no pairs that say it can't happen. What about direction? Again, this is another one where I'm going to actually probably do a little sketch and bring it from bottom to top. And now I start to think, well, I've got my times is above the flat. And if I look here, there's the flat of my shield shape. And it's got the plus above it, when it should actually be the times that's above it. So that's why it's not D. Again, these two would need to swap round. Right, 6, 7, 8. B, B, and D. Let's do it. B, B, and D. Let's go through and talk about why they can't be. So for question 6, we've got this arrow will be pointing towards my equal signs, but actually I already can tell we've got a pair discrepancy. Those two shouldn't be next to each other. For C, we've got this next to that. Okay, I'm happy with it so far. So yeah, it could be. What don't I like about it? Well, if you look, this should be pointing. So if you consider this equals part, it should be pointing into the side. Well, what you'll notice is my two equals here are running in the same direction. So again, one of these has been rotated round. And in fact, the one that's been rotated, I believe, is this one. It's been rotated incorrectly. So D, that leaves. We should have, again, my arrow, and it's pointing in. So if I was to draw this as a cube, again, the arrow would be pointing towards the flat, but currently I've got my arrow pointing in towards the gap, so it's not D. And again, that side has been rotated incorrectly. So the answer is B. Question 7, if we have a little look, why not A? Well, I could have these three next to each other, that's fine. I would want this pointing away from the square, but this one here, again, this one, when I folded it down, would be pointing in, so that my line of my division sign would be pointing in towards the square, and we all notice it's currently pointing away from it. So again, it should look like that. So, but it doesn't. So this one has been rotated wrong, so it's not A. Look at question C. What's wrong with question C? Well, it's pointing towards smiley face. That could be okay. But if you look, this one again, so the one where my pairs, these two should never be in the same shape, so it's not C. And again, I look at number D. Well, my arrow should be pointing, or this, if I'm going to consider it an arrow, it should be pointing towards my smiley face. And currently, it's pointing towards a circle, so not D. Question 8. Why not A? Well, I should never have my short arrow and this shape in the same picture. And if that's the long arrow, it should be pointing away. So it can't be A for two reasons. One, if it's a pair discrepancy, or even if it was this arrow, that one there, it should be pointing away from the shape, not towards it. So not A. B, well, we've got the short arrow and the two-sided shape, so that's okay so far. We should have these two should be pointing. Well, if you look, these arrows here, give them some direction, should be pointing at my short arrow. If you look, they aren't, so this should be in that direction, where it's pointing in towards the short arrow, but also it should be pointing towards the side of the short arrow going up, so B is wrong on many counts. so that all the directions in B are incorrect. For part C, I've got my long arrow and my short arrow. They're pointing in opposite directions. That's a good sign. It's pointing, however, it's pointing away from this two-sided shape with the two arrows. And hopefully you can see this long one here should be pointing towards it. So it can't be C because the long arrow in this one is pointing away from the two arrows, the two L-shaped arrows. It should be pointing towards them. And that leaves D again. Right, last two. Doing really well, guys. Question 9 is C. 10 is D. What you'll notice about questions like question 9, where they've used repeated shapes, but also shapes that don't have as much direction, it can be hard to use some of the rules. So you'll hopefully see, because we might end up relying on other shapes. Let's first do my pairs. Well, I've got 1 and 2, so I should never have my two circles together, so I can get rid of B. I should never have my grey and my black circle, my grey and my black triangles together, which I don't. And I should never have my black circle and my white triangle. So black circle, white triangle. I think that's a grey circle, black triangle. So okay, between C and D, why is each of these correct? Well, I've got my grey pointing towards white, that's good. And this one pointing in, that's fine. Why isn't it D for question 9? Well, the black circle here is pointing in towards my grey, which means that's fine. However, what about the two circles? D is a good question. D, and again, in terms of directions, I've got my black triangle pointing towards the grey, the white triangle pointing towards the grey, that's fine. But if you look here, if my circle's the top, which should be on the left? It should be, if I have the same shape, not a very expert drawing, but functional, it should be the white one on the left and the black one on the right, with then the grey circle up the top. So this is one of those classic examples where it's right versus left, and they're always, I think, the harder ones to spot, which is why we leave them till the end. So in this one, it's the fact that the triangle's going around. That's why it's not D. Right, that means the last question then for us to do. Question 10, let's have a look. So we know the answer is D. Why isn't it A? I think it's because we can't have these two next to each other, so not A. Why not B? Well, if we've got this one coming forward, along with the hashes, the stripes. Well, look, right away again, diagonal. So these two are a pair, so it can't be B. Good. I love it when we get down to 50-50. What about C? Why isn't it C? We could have these two next to each other, because we could bring that one around to the top. But in terms of directions, now I'm not going to tell anything from these two. Can I work out in terms of the horizontal? Let's do a little sketch. I think that's going to help me. So this is my dotty square up top. How will this one fit in? Well, it'll be rotated inwards, which means what's going horizontally this way will end up looking, in here, would end up looking like this, which means they're pointing into the center. But you can see these aren't, they're pointing horizontal. So I don't think it's D because, well, actually, there's two reasons. One, I don't think these arrows are in the right direction, but also, similar to that last question, if we make the grey one the top, and we look at it from this direction, so imagine we're facing, on the right hand side should be the dotted square, and on the left side should be, so C is definitely wrong, because it's left and right wrong, as well as having those directions wrong there. So number 10, the answer is D. Oh, good questions. Right, guys, give yourself a score out of 10. Again, you might have 2 scores if you gave yourself a little bit longer than the 5 minutes to do them. Don't worry, please, if you found these hard, because they are a bit of a challenge. It's just one of those things where practice is really, really going to help. The more patterns you see, the more times you're exposed to things, the more you get to look for them, the easier it will get. Also, don't be afraid to cut out. I've seen some fantastic things where people have cut out their own grids, and again, just having your own bit of paper cut out into the shape of a net, but allowing you to fold things, see how they work. For example, this one here, number 9, maybe it's the fact that it was one of these sort of S-shaped grids that threw you and not the more standard T-shapes. Cut a few of them out and see them, work out how they fold and work out how they match and see how opposite sides compare, especially when you've got ones like this where this one is coming onto the end. being able to actually see that physically, I think is really useful. So these are all things that will help increase your speed as you become more and more practiced. Right, cubes and nets test number, is it test number 8? Well, it's the one on pages 26 and 27 is what we're going to do next. And this is a slightly different style of cubes and nets questions. So it's test number 9. And this is one where they're only going to give you 2 of the things filled in. Sorry, 3 of the things filled in. The rest don't count. So this, in a way, can help because it means it really focuses you. You know exactly what you're looking at. But it also means you're much more likely thinking about things in terms of direction. Similarly, I would go through, I would eliminate, I would have to think about in terms of the order. You're never going to be able to have, for example, right off the bat, when you have 3 here, set up B, because they always have to be able to form a top, a front, and a side. And if you look, this would be a top and a bottom. So the rules here still apply in terms of pairing, but it's easier because, simply put, if they give you a pair, irrelevant of whether they exist or not, it can't be used to make. So hopefully you can see that because these are a pair, they're always on opposite sides, so that B can never exist, where you'll notice these are always in little L shapes. And actually, this little L-shaped pattern, you'll notice where it's got top, front, side, top, front, side, top, front, side, will always hopefully jump out to you. But again, go through, the same rules apply. Just remember with pairs, if the pair, irrelevant whether the pair happens at all, irrelevant what's on the pair, you can just eliminate it straight away. So let's have a look at why isn't it C? Well, I can hopefully you can see that my triangle here, the base is pointing away from the top of the square, but you can see this is pointing in. So that's why it's not C. They swap those round. And then to compare D and A, again, this would be correct in terms of pointing, but if I, for example, when you want to compare left and right-handed shapes, I think it's really advisable to make something the top. So if, for example, I consider my triangle the top, so it matches the example given, if this triangle is the top, I should have the square on the left, circle on the right. This one here, if I was to make the triangle on the top, and you'd be looking at it from this direction here, you'd see the circles on the left and the squares on the right. So that's why it's incorrect. So whenever you're doing this, give yourself a direction and decide what's going to be the top of the shape and see how the other ones hang down, and then it becomes much easier to spot what's on the left and what's on the right. So the reason it's not D is because it's circles on the left, the squares on the right, and it should be the other way around. So A is our answer. But again, you can apply the same rules. You're just much more focused, and it's much more likely of these to be points 3 and 4 on our scale. So if we look here, it's just, you know what I mean, with this style of question, it's much more likely. It's much more likely to be arrows and tails and left versus right, because they only give you 3 sides to consider. They're not going to have eliminating aliens appear at all often, and in fact the pairs are less common as well. So these are slightly harder and they use the harder skills, but then they do direct what you want to focus at. Right guys, again, you've got 5 minutes, so I will see you all when it's done. Really good luck. Your time starts now. Right guys, welcome back. I'm going to start going through the answer with you. So hopefully you're ready for that. So I'm going to reveal the first answer now. If you do need a bit more time, if you haven't finished, that's fine. Take the time, go away, finish it, and then come back. I think it's worth doing that, so you just get the chance to really think through the questions, rather than just listening through to the explanations now. So here are the answers. So 1 is C, 2 is B, and 3 is C. And if we go through and talk about why. So C, B, C. Guys, the reason I'm going through these explanations in a bit more detail is because if you actually look at the answers at the back, they don't have explanations with them. So I think it's worth just going through and talking about why we eliminate things. Well, first off, A, that's a classic example where they've given us a pair. So we can eliminate those because there's no way to get that row to bend round to the side. Similarly, B, it's a pair. There's no way using this to create a cube, so it can't work. We look at D. D could work, but I'm going to designate my little Pac-Man at the top. And hopefully you can see if this is the top, the left is a diamond, right is a circle, and that's the wrong way around, so it's not D. Question 2. Again, they've given us a pair, so it can't be made. The answer is B. C, have they given us a pair? No, they've not. But in this one, again, if I designate the black circle my top, what would end up happening is these would wrap around, and I'm sort of looking at it from this direction now. So if I'm facing that direction, this is my left and this is my right. And as you can see, it should go white, grey, not grey, white, so that's incorrect. And if I look at D, again, they're going to pair. That's eliminated. Question 3, let's have a look. First off, any pairs we can eliminate. A is not a pair, but if you look, this arrow is pointing in towards the arch, and on the example it should be pointing away, so it's not A. On B, again, no pair, it is pointing away now, here, but why isn't it correct? Well, if I bring that round to the top, so that would loop round, facing in this direction. What's incorrect about B? Tough one. I'm going to leave that for a moment. Keep going. Right, number D. What can I spot with D? Well, again, they're given as a pair with these two are all in the same plane, so it can't be D. I am happy that, yeah, if you look, that would fold round under there and that fold. So it's the arrow on the left, circle on the right. But I'm still trying to work out why this one would be incorrect. If I make that the top, I'm looking at it from this direction. My arrow would be on the left and my circle would be on the right by my account. So I think, for as far as I can tell, question 3B is correct. Let me just go back and check it one more time with no drawings. So if I rotate these down, maybe I'm going to bring these two down here and see. So that would be facing downwards, facing inwards, facing upwards. So that would be like that. I can bring this and just draw it round like this. And now if I look at those, are they facing the correct direction? Well, that's pointing away from my arrow. And if you look here, it shouldn't be pointing away, it should be pointing the opposite direction. So I think that is the reason why it's incorrect. And that's why, guys, just sketching things, doing things from a different angle can really help. That one, it took me a little while to think about it. If I draw it back up here just to show you what was going on, this one, it was the fact that that arrow direction was, when this comes round, would be going in the opposite direction where they should. Pointing like this, not, as it's drawn in the picture, like that. So that was the mistake. So that's why B is incorrect, which means C is correct. Good question, number 3. I like that. Right, question 4, 5, and 6. So let's go through the answers. The answers are D, B, and C. D, B, and C. So if I do it now, question 4, why is A incorrect? Well, again, I'm going to just bring this round here to the bottom. And that would now be facing, if I loop that round, it would be facing in this direction. And that to me looks okay. Except I think here again, if you look, if we now considered it from this direction, because this is now my top, so I have to look from this way, the heart should be on the left and the heart is on the right hand side. So it's not A because those two are the wrong way around. Let's have a look at B. Well, I can always tell this flat line here, this base of my triangle, should match with the heart, but in this case it's matching with the plus, so it's not B. And C, they've given us a pair, so we can just eliminate that, leaving D as the correct answer. Number 5. Let's see, there's a quick pair on D, so let's get rid of that straight away. Again, just to give myself some lines, I want the dots of my divide sign to be next to the times, and I want the line to be pointing towards the plus. So right off the bat, I can see A, look, the line is plus dot, so it's the wrong way around. It should be the other way around. And let's look at C. So I said the dots should go to the plus, that's fine, and the line should point towards the, oh no, again, look, same mistake. They've got the dots pointing towards the plus, so you can get rid of C as well, because dots times line plus dots plus, so it's the wrong way around. Question 6. Right, so we've got a blank circle, a circle with a plus, and a circle with a times. What can we eliminate to start with? Well, again, I'm going to designate my plus the top. So if this plus is the top, I should have the times on the left and the blank on the right. So if this is the top, I'm looking at it from this direction. I'll end up having my circle on the left and my times on the right. Well, that's wrong. Let's again mark this one. So we want the plus to be the top. So if that's the top, I'm looking at it from this side again as well. Again, wrong way around. Blank on the left. It should be on the right hand side. Let's look at C. We know C is correct from the answers, but again, if you look, times on the left, blank on the right. Let's do this last one. So if this, and again, look, so this is all examples of left versus right, so this is a really good way of practicing it. But again, hopefully we're looking at it from this angle now to compare these two, and that's on the left, that's on the right, wrong way around, so it's not D. 7 and 8, last 2 questions. So there only were 8 questions for these. The answers were A and C. And let's just go and see if we can eliminate any. So we should have the line here pointing into the middle of the crescent. So look, again, line pointing to the middle of the crescent. So that's why I like A. We've got the line here pointing to the outside of the crescent, not the middle. So that's why B is incorrect. In this one, they're in a row, so we've got a pair, so it can't be C. And then looking here, again, if I match these round, if this one was to be in there, let me actually just draw it for you. So in order for this edge to meet this edge, the shape ends up looking like this. And hopefully you can see my little banana, my little moon is facing the wrong direction. This one needs to be rotated, and that's why it's not D. Good questions. Right, last one, question 8. Some interesting shapes here, but again, they've given us some arrows. So I know, for example, if any of my arrows are pointing towards an L shape, that's wrong. Also, if they give me any pairs, well, B right here, that's a pair, so it can't exist. We should have, can you see that the arrow here is pointing towards, so if I draw that top shape, you've kind of got a rectangle like this. Well, the arrow should be pointing in the same line as this. What you'll notice on this one, it's pointing to the flat. So it's not A. In order for A to be correct, I'd have to have the box this way, not the way that it's drawn. So that's incorrect. We've already eliminated B. Let's look at D. Can we eliminate that in any way? Well, I like the way that this is matched. But again, if I'm going to give myself a top, let's bring this over. This is a nice thing to show as my final point on cubes and nets. If I was to move this block and consider how it matches, what you'll notice each time it rotates. So if I was to move this block here, in this space 1 up, it would look like this, with the arrowheads on. If I was to move it up again, it would look like this. And of course, if I was to move it up again, it would change. But I think by having it in that position facing that way, what you'll hopefully be able to see is if it was there, it would be pointing in towards the shape, which we don't want. It should actually be facing up. So again, it's this double-headed arrow, excuse me, that's rotated incorrectly. So we can get rid of D for that reason. And there you go, we've gone through them all. And guys, I'm sorry if you just wanted the answers, but remember, with any of these activities, you can always check the answers at the back, but I thought it was worth me going through these in a bit more detail because the answers didn't have any explanations. And I think with cubes and nets, it's really important to be able to see, to be able to visualize the explanations. Right, this leads to the last stage. So here we've got the homework. So this is the weeks 3, both of them, weeks 3 for myself and Chris. Obviously, if you've seen Chris's video, I'm sure he'll have his on there. It's nice to include it. For me, the books you'll need is the spatial reasoning book and these quick practice tests pack. And this pack is the sort of cling film pack full of, it's got 6 sort of exam practice style question sheets. So you do 2 of those. Of course, that is only that you could. What will happen is you'll get the homework review video by next Friday. So we'll be busy preparing that next week. I think really, guys, that's where I want to leave everything. So, of course, the final point, just to remind you, I know I mentioned it again, but if you do have any questions, you're more than welcome to come to any of our sessions, and we will have a Q&A now running at the end of every session. So if you know the schedule due to finish at 4 o'clock, from 4 o'clock to 4:15, for example, myself or Chris would be there to answer questions. And that's a really lovely way for you guys to make sure all your questions are answered. And of course, as well as Chris and I at the live sessions, all your tutors will be phoning you over the next few days. That's really important. So please make sure they get in contact. We just want to make sure every tutor gets in contact, but also you can always reach out to your tutor via their email addresses that you should have had an email for. And if you don't, please do get in contact with the office because it's really important we maintain that rapport, that relationship, and make sure everyone is getting the support they need. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely week. Bye-bye.